The last time anyone saw Claire Mercer, she was folding a blue hospital blanket into a neat square on the break room table. She told her coworker she'd be home in an hour. Her car was still in the driveway. Her phone buzzed with a text that read, "See you tomorrow, Nurse Claire. Thanks for covering my shift." By morning, the whole town of Harlow Falls knew the truth. Claire was gone. Harlow Falls was the kind of place where people knew each other's kids' names, where the diner kept a jar labeled "Lost and Found, take what you need," and where a missing person felt like a wound the whole town could feel. Claire was 40, a night shift ER nurse at St. Augustine's, and a quiet constant in that town. She lived in a modest two-story on Maple Street with her aging mother, Lena, who baked pies for the church bazaar and kept her grandson's baseball trophies in a glass case. Claire had been the person everyone trusted in a crisis. Calm, efficient, and with a way of holding a trembling hand so whatever hurt felt a little smaller. That trust made her disappearance feel personal. Claire didn't come home on a Tuesday night. When Lena called at 10:30 p.m. and got no answer, she assumed Claire was running late. But at 2 a.m., panic nudged her into calling the hospital. The receptionist said Claire had left after her shift. CCTV from the back parking lot showed Claire walking to her car under sodium yellow lights. A delivery log showed a food service truck pulled up. That was normal. By dawn, the town had search parties and hashtags. The police issued a missing person alert. 3 days later, a jogger found Claire's phone lodged in a muddy ditch a mile from her house. The screen was cracked, the battery dead. There was no sign of a struggle at the parking lot. No torn clothing, no blood. But in the chest of Claire's jacket, the jacket her mother later insisted she always wore, there was a smear of something that forensics would call indeterminate on first glance. Her car was at home, keys in the bowl by the door. Her front door was unlocked. Inside the house, nothing seemed disturbed, except a coffee cup in the sink with dried coffee and a lipstick stain on the rim. Unusual for Claire, who rarely wore makeup. Detective Marcus Hale was the lead. He'd been on the force long enough to know how hope and horror behave in small towns. On paper, the case started like many. A missing adult, no obvious motive, lots of worried neighbors. But the deeper investigators looked, the more the neat lines blurred. First, they gathered CCTV from the hospital, nearby streets, and the few homes that had cameras. Cell tower pings showed Claire's phone moving for a short stretch after she left the parking lot, then going dead near an old quarry road where the jogging path crossed. Forensics on the phone recovered a single deleted message. 2 words, "Don't tell." Context, none. Suspects accumulated like cloud cover. There was Jonah Reed, a divorced handyman who'd shown up the week before to fix Claire's porch light and later made awkward, persistent attempts to see her. Then there was a man from Claire's past, a brief relationship 20 years ago who had recently reconnected online, and a patient at the hospital, Leonard Cross, who'd been discharged the day before and had a criminal history. Social media volunteers pointed at the delivery driver seen on the CCTV. Local gossip whispered about a late-night stranger seen near Claire's car weeks earlier. Jonah had been at home with an airtight alibi. He was on video at a friend's house late into the night, drinking and playing cards. Leonard Cross's fingerprints were on hospital files, but not on anything that tied him to Claire physically. The online ex had a clean record, and while his messages were clumsy and clingy, they were not threatening. The delivery driver was cooperative and had proof of his route. The red herrings mounted, and the pressure in town grew. Breakthroughs came slowly. A tech analyst named Priya found something odd in a public CCTV feed. a shadowed silhouette moving against the grain of the footage near the quarry at 12:16 a.m. The silhouette matched the outline of a man carrying a boxy bag. It didn't match Jonah or the ex, but it did match the frame of Elliott Shaw, Claire's neighbor and a volunteer firefighter everyone trusted. Elliott was a 46-year-old handyman by trade, liked at the soccer field and lauded for hauling lawn chairs for community events. He visited Claire sometimes under the pretext of lawn care. Sometimes they exchanged recipes. Nobody thought to look at him twice. Why him? The evidence assembled a kind of circumstantial web. Security footage from a gas station 2 miles from Claire's house showed a vehicle with a dented fender, one matching Elliott's truck, near the time Claire vanished. Cell data placed his phone near the quarry that night, though he claimed he'd been at the firehouse. When detectives searched Elliott's truck, they found a coffee cup with traces of the same lipstick type as the cup in Claire's sink. Forensics on a discarded glove in the quarry returned a partial DNA match to Claire. Not sufficient for a conviction alone, but enough to build pressure. Elliott's neighbors were stunned. He was the kind of man who smiled too easily in town histories. Inside, Elliott had been living with a secret pattern of control. He was both helpful and possessive, quick to step in and fix things for people who thanked him in ways that flattened into dependency. He'd lost a partner years earlier and quietly resented the world for carrying on while he carried weight. Interviews revealed that he kept a box of mementos from people he'd helped. Polaroids, ticket stubs, wrappers, a private shrine to small debts withheld and favors banked. Claire, by contrast, had cultivated a gentle privacy. She didn't broadcast her grief or her debts. She'd taken on extra shifts at St. Augustine's to help pay for Lena's rising medical bills. Friends described a woman who gave parts of herself away and sometimes forgot to take care of her own. Detective Hale's team put together the emotional arithmetic. A helpful neighbor who felt owed. A woman stretched thin by care and secrecy. A small town that doesn't guard its own against the slow creep of entitlement. It's not a dramatic motive like passion or rage. It's a slow furnace of resentment that gets fed by small slights, real and imagined. Just when the case seemed to point at Elliott, a public tip shifted attention again. A woman came forward saying she'd seen Claire at a gas station 3 nights after she'd disappeared. The town's appetite for mystery grew. The tip turned out to be mistaken, an honest misidentification, but it dissolved the neat timeline and forced the team to re-examine assumptions about when Claire went missing. Another twist. The hospital's HR files showed Claire had been filing reports about missing narcotics. Small quantities meant for patients that sometimes went unaccounted for. That raised the possibility that anyone with access to meds could have a motive, not to harm Claire specifically, but to shut her up. Investigators dug into colleagues. The hospital community bristled. Nurses who considered Claire family felt violated. But the narcotics angle fizzled when audits showed no missing records that aligned with her rounds. Still, it burned the town with suspicion and turned co-workers into tentative witnesses rather than allies. Finally, the tiny clues converged. Phone data, security footage, and a witness who came forward after reading a local thread all lined up. Elliott had driven to the quarry and returned home with a muddy boot print on his floor. Confronted with the pattern, Elliott cracked. He admitted to following Claire from the hospital that night. He said he wanted to confront her about not returning a loan she didn't remember borrowing. He insisted he hadn't meant to hurt her. But when detectives pressed, the story changed. An argument, a shove, a panicked moment near the water. He had dragged what he thought was an unconscious Claire into his trunk because he claimed he was trying to wake her up in the privacy of his garage. That privacy became a space for panic and poor decisions compounded into tragedy. Elliott was arrested and charged with kidnapping and manslaughter. The medical examiner's report. Once Claire's remains were found downstream weeks later, cited blunt force trauma and drowning. The community's relief at an arrest was mixed with a hollow grief. Elliott's confession never read as pure malice, but as a cascade of entitlement, fear, and catastrophic misjudgment. In court, the defense painted him as a broken man. The prosecution emphasized the planning, the drive, the concealment, the attempts to hide evidence. He was convicted. His sentence and the appeals followed as an echo in the town's newspapers and online threads. Harlow Falls didn't return to normal. There were changes. St. Augustine's instituted stricter check-in protocols for staff. The diner installed new cameras, and the church started a community watch program. Lena moved in with her son for a while. A scholarship in Claire's name funded training for neighborhood nurses. People were kinder, in small ways, to those they saw alone in lines or leaving work late, because they had learned how quickly privacy could be exploited. And yet, some questions hung heavy. Was Claire's extra workload and quiet financial strain a root cause? Did community culture, the way favors and debts get mixed into relationships, create patterns that made certain people vulnerable? The town learned something about the thinness between neighborly kindness and control, between help and ownership. True crime stories often thrill with their forensic puzzles or their courtroom drama. But the quieter truth from Harlow Falls is simpler and harder. Danger rarely arrives as a cinematic villain. It comes as a person you trust, who greets you at the coffee shop and knows the code to your porch light. It arrives through small, unremarkable choices that, stacked together, break a life. Claire's family decided not to let the case settle into a single headline. They used her death to build a small community fund to support caregivers and nurses who worked nights. Detective Hale, marked by the case, started a program to teach officers about financial vulnerability and domestic coercion. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was preventive. When you walk through Harlow Falls now, you'll see a tidy row of solar lights on Maple Street and a plaque in front of the clinic. People still talk about Claire in soft voices. They don't always agree on what could have been done differently. They do agree on one thing. Grief taught them vigilance. Not paranoia, but a steadier look at the lives quietly held together by the fragile kindnesses of strangers and neighbors. If you listen to the town's stories, the lesson isn't wholly satisfying, because it's not dramatic. It's domestic. It says, watch who you call neighbor, and watch what you owe one another.